kiss. Real fit against so lit, I guess so bitch, now let's go. I can show you where my heart's at. See it on my sleeve. Even if the beat stops, my soul will not leave. If I never stood tall, nobody.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Big time. Tuesday, January 13th, hanging with the fellas. Pinky, Cam, how you guys doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm feeling like a champion.
Oh, you are? Well, on that note, why don't we just go ahead and
light them up. Smoke them if you got them.
victory cigar time, baby. Nuggies won. First championship in history. Unbelievable. I'm so stoked. I watched it by myself last night, just going ape shit all by myself. I'm sure the neighbors were like, what the hell is happening?
You didn't get any noise complaints?
No, luckily. But just, man, being a Nuggets fan my whole life and seeing the lowest of lows in NBA history to now the mountaintop, it is unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I know you boys can still feel the pain of that. Like, I don't know, were you 7 games that season before we got Melo? Like
11 and 71.
Yeah, just awful. It felt like 7. It felt like nothing. It was
the worst record in NBA history at the time. It has since been broken, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it was real bad. Real bad. Went from highs as a little kid to the first 8 seed to ever beat a 1 when the Nuggets went into Seattle. Everybody knows that famous moment of Dikembe holding the ball above his head while he's laying underneath the basket. To some really lean years. Then Melo showed up. There was a lot of hope there. I thought they would get over that hump. There was a 6-game loss to the Lakers in the conference finals that still stings a little bit because I believe there were some insanely poor coaching decisions on a couple out-of-bound plays that cost them some games. Then we went low again for a little while. As Mike Malone and Jokic have talked about, they could barely get people in the arena for a while. And now, NBA champions, baby.
Yeah, I actually the day of the game, or so Monday, I think it was, so Monday, or it was maybe Sunday, I can't remember, but they had like this one thing on Twitter, right, which is tweet something that had you in the pit of your stomach. And obviously me being a little bit more focused on the Broncos side of things, but also being a Denver Nuggets fan for as long as I have been, I just want to make it Denver Nuggets related. And so I chose the inbound pass in Game 3 against the Los Angeles Lakers, where Kenyon Martin had the bad pass to Trevor Ariza. And because at that moment, like, it felt like that was the basically the turning of the tables, if you will, for that series.
They'll blame George Karl for that decision. Just awful. Then Greg Anthony the next game.
Anthony Carter, I think, is who you're.
Sorry, Anthony Carter. You're absolutely right. Not Greg Anthony. I'm sorry.
But I think that you really said it perfectly. Like, with the way that the Nuggets were constructed is basically being, for comparison's sake, the Colorado Rockies of the NBA for a period of time, to winning as an A seed against George Karl's Seattle Supersonics, and Dikembe, famously holding that basketball on the court, just crying. And then you see the lows a little bit still, but then you see the highs of when George Karl came in, and he creates with what was, at least at that point in time, the best Nuggets team that we had ever seen until the Michael Malone years. And then the Michael Malone years is where you get into and we'll probably talk about it, but the fun similarities between the Jared Bednar team and the Michael Malone team. There are some weird similarities between both of those teams, and even how it was built and not bought, right? I mean, that's the big
absolutely. And I mean, I've talked a lot of crap about that ownership group mainly because the fans are getting screwed over for the last 3 years. But a lot of props need to go to Kroenke and his patience, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, but yeah, so to go from where it was to where it is now, and then the Denver Nuggets, where it was built and not bought, except for a few trading of pieces and important pieces, mind you, not the the Kevin Durant's of the world, or any player that feels the need to be like that superstar that is the missing piece for a championship. No, like this is like the Golden State Warriors before Kevin Durant, like truly built but not bought. The San Antonio Spurs, built but not bought. Like this is like you just feel you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself, but it just feels like it's the start of something. And you just can't help but be or you can't help but be so excited for what's to come. Because unlike the Avs, and I will say this, unlike the Avs, there's at least one player that you need to make the case that needs to come back, and that is Bruce Brown. And the Avs, you had to kind of pick and choose between Nichushkin and Nazem Kadri. And here, your starting five is literally set for like 3 or 4 years. So
next two solid. Then you're gonna have to make some decisions, and we'll talk about that a little bit after we get through the game, because the new CBA is going to play into that, and the way the NBA is kind of setting themselves up for the future, and really trying to avoid the superstars setting themselves up for championship runs with 3 solid dudes. It's just not going to go down that way with the new CBA. So. There's a lot to talk about there as well. Is Kroenke going to be willing to truly dip into the luxury tax finally? Because he's been pretty against that in the past. But he's got a title now, and he's got a young core. That can change everything very quickly on how you decide to spend money. So, maybe he decides to rent that house in the top of Ball Arena out and get a little bit of extra cash to pay for the team. Who knows?
Or that's where Bruce Brown lives once he resigns.
There you go. Hey, buddy, you want to stay with us? Here's your new home.
We'll give you a discount, no rent. You can live here rent-free, just a little bit less on your salary. That's all. A little bit less.
Yeah, absolutely. This is interesting, and we can kind of jump in here. KB82, I disagree only in this sense. Christian Brown is not quite ready to take over what Bruce Brown did. And the reason I say that is because Christian Brown's offense is not quite at the same level as Bruce Brown's yet. It will develop there, I fully believe. But it's not there yet. He needs another year or two minimum before he is at the level of Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown played with an ultimate confidence. And I'm not saying Christian Brown doesn't have that or that he didn't play that way, but there's a veteran calm about Bruce Brown with that ultimate competitiveness and confidence that allowed him to put himself in position to succeed. And Christian's so young in the NBA. This was his rookie year. So young that he's just not there yet, regardless of what anybody wants to say. There are so many things still for him to pick up and learn, but he got some insanely big minutes and big-time moments that allowed him to fast-track his development in this playoff run.
Yep.
Yeah, you know how I feel about Brown. Both Browns.
I do. You got a Jayhawk on your leg that says you're a big fan.
What can Brown do for you? They can help you win the finals. That's basically,
right.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that a lot, Cam. Another good thought, KB82. Look, this was a team. Everybody accepted their role. They accepted their responsibilities, and nobody complained. You never heard any disgruntledness. I like that word. I just made that up probably. Disgruntledness within the organization. It would not surprise me. Now, Bruce has a player option, but it would not surprise me to see them rework it just enough to stay within their means for him to have some incentive-laden issues going forward that will allow him to stay with this team and run it back. This team is so close, and there was such a togetherness about them that I do not see anybody pricing themselves out of being able to run it back next year. I don't.
Yeah, and that's
I could be wrong. The NBA landscape changes very quickly.
I disagree. I think Brown played well enough throughout the season as well as during the playoffs that dude's going to get a bag. And I can't fault the guy for getting the bag when it's there because it might be his one chance to really cash in. But
there's there and you can easily look at it both ways because like he's gonna get the the probably a sixth man contract, which by NBA contract standards is pretty high.
Mid-level max,
Yeah.
somewhere in there.
But I mean, still though, like when you Caleb talked about it, when you have such a tight knit group and a group that is very clearly, and we said earlier, has grown together. And when you have that opportunity to grow and maybe even become an even better player, and Christian Brown can be an even better player, he may not necessarily. So, like, if they bring Bruce Brown back, he may not necessarily have more minutes, but I will say, like, he still could still very well be on that truck to be a better player, even with some of those minutes, right? So it's just it's one of those cases, like you have such a deep team and a camaraderie led team that is led by a selfless superstar. And from that point, like everything just has fallen into place from that point. I mean, in correlation to Bruce Brown and Christian Brown, like that just goes to show you how close knit this team is. For Michael Porter Jr., who we'll talk about him and how he had a struggling finals, but yet he was maybe the one guy that kept that game 5 afloat until the fourth quarter. But for him to say the kind of stuff that he said this entire playoff series, which is if Michael Malone wants to put Bruce Brown in the game instead of me, or Christian Brown in the game instead of me, so be it. We're here to win a championship. And that's the kind of stuff that you need in order to push that needle forward and create this golden era as now DNVR Nuggets has really, formulated, which is a great thing now.
That book looks great. I'm excited to see if that might be worth I'm probably going to spend way too much money on Nugget stuff, but
here's part of the reason, Pinky. I think they run it back, and I think this team does stay together. There could be a couple little changes to the end of the bench, but I think the core that you saw in this playoff run stays together, and this is why. And this is a quote that I have loved for years, a couple decades at least, since the very first time I heard it. And when I heard Mike Malone reference it last night, and it was something that he and the team had kind of lived by, and I heard him say it at the podium, I got goosebumps. And this is the quote from Pat Riley. You go from a nobody to an upstart, and you go from an upstart to a winner, and a winner to a contender to a champion, and a champion to a dynasty. That is something that has been in that team's ear all season long. And they're not satisfied. They're not complacent. They're not, we made history and we're out. Let's go collect our bags and be done. I truly believe this team is ready to do something incredibly special. And the fact that they're set up the way they are, where the starting 5 is all under contract for a minimum of 2 years. They're all homegrown, like Cam was talking about. This team was drafted, minus the trade for Aaron Gordon, but you've got to make some of those deals within the course of your run to be able to maintain the run. They're all 28 or younger. The starting 5 is all locked up for 2 years or more. The bench has some key pieces locked up. And you've got veterans, young guys, and right in the middle. It's like the perfect combination of everything. And I've said this before, Pinky. I've mentioned this quite a bit over the course of this year. And people scoffed at me. They laughed at me. They told me I was foolish. And I never backed down. This Denver Nuggets team, and Cam referenced it, is set up and built the exact same way that the Golden State Warriors were. The exact same way. And Golden State was able to win one before Durant got there and one after Durant left. Now, the one after Durant left was on the back end of their careers. They're still talented enough to get it done, so I'm not going to count out Golden State by any means. The talent level on that team is absurd. But when you look at the similarities between them, the unselfishness, the ball movement continuously, the willing to put on effort on the defensive end of the court when it truly matters. And the patience given by ownership. I'm going to mention this time and time again tonight. The patience given by ownership to allow this team to fail, grow, learn, mature, and then succeed cannot be understated. It is a huge deal. In today's modern sports, not just the NBA, sports across the board. Michael Malone, if it was any other team, I truly believe this. If it was any other team, he'd have been fired 3 years ago. 3 years ago, after they lost that last game of the season against the Timberwolves to get into the playoffs.
And actually, Caleb, that did happen. The Sacramento Kings made the mistake of firing Michael Malone 3 years into his coaching career, and he had the Kings above 500. And a lot of people in the they letting go of why are they letting go of Malone? Like, why are they letting go of Malone? And they did that. And yeah, he went and was hired by the Nuggets, and the rest is truly history. So thanks, Sacramento.
Our basketball guy is a Kings fan. He owns a Kings website, writes for the Kings. He still to this day is like, I have no idea why they fired Michael Malone. He's a good coach. Like, all they did was basically delay getting better by going through these multiple coaches before they got to Monty Williams. Or whoever's
not Monty Williams, Mike Brown.
Mike Brown.
Here's the difference with Sacramento and Denver. And let me say this first. I've already eaten my crow about Malone. I'll eat it anytime somebody wants to throw it at me. I never said he was a bad coach. I always said he was a really good coach. I just didn't know if he was the right coach to get this team to a championship.
Right.
I was always 50-50 on that hill. And I said if he gets them over the hump and he can get to the finals, I didn't need a championship. I just needed him to get them to the finals. I was going to eat my crow all day for the rest of my life, and I will never care. Malone made me eat that crow, and I'm ecstatic about it.
Tastes like
the
glucose.
biggest thing I always had with Malone, and the more I've thought about it, the more I should have recognized this sooner, was you never hear him come out and say, this one's on me. I didn't have my guys prepared. I didn't have the right scheme. I wasn't ready to go up against the other coach, so on and so forth. Like you hear a lot of coaches doing. Take some ownership from time to time so that your guys don't have to do it. Never heard him do it. Never. But the thing that I failed to take into consideration sooner was the fact that he has Nikola Jokic as his star. Probably the most humble superstar in any sport in the history of sports.
That dude wants no part of being a superstar. He just wants to come to work, do his job, and go home.
So when you can have that kind of superstar leading the locker room, the coach can say pretty much anything he wants to on a podium because you know that your superstar is going to be okay taking the heat and going forward because all he really cares about is the team and winning. He doesn't care about himself. He doesn't care about his numbers, which makes him exceptional. So going back to the Kings, the reason I think the Kings made the right decision at the time to let Malone go was because their roster was nowhere near what the Nuggets is right now or nowhere near what they have right now with Fox and Sabonis and the other guys around them.
If you're able to
they
take
were
a
still
team with nothing and still make them 500, that's pretty good coaching.
I'm not saying it's not, but they still had to find the right pieces in order for him to coach those pieces. It's no different than George Karl, how stoked he was when they made the Carmelo trade because he finally got to coach a team without a superstar. George Karl hates superstars. It's notoriously known. He never got along with his superstars. He didn't get along with Sean Kemp and Gary Payton in Seattle. He didn't get along with Sam Cassell and Big Dog Glenn Robinson out in Milwaukee. And he didn't get along with Melo out in Denver.
Yep.
It's notoriously known. Now, none of them necessarily have a bad thing to say about George Karl, but for whatever reason, things never seemed to work out the way they needed them to with George Karl. When he got that team without Melo, he made that team exceptional out of nowhere. And he got to play his brand of basketball without anybody on the team having an I mentality. Michael Malone's able to do that because he has Nikola Jokic as his guy.
And to further this a little bit, and again, you're going to be hearing us say patience and built but not bought a lot tonight. But there was a point in time, and I talked about this, and I'm sure Pinky heard it on the 5280 podcast, but it's like there was a point where at one point at another under the Michael Malone era where it was Yusef Nurkic and Emmanuel Mudiay, not Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. And, and so I think we also should have seen, even at the early point where it's like, so Michael Malone clearly sees something within these two players, but he's also not going to stretch them out just yet before really giving them the wings and really let them grow within them as a player. Now, the one thing that was very evident was you could very easily tell how both players were just better ticked and operated in terms of Mudiay and obviously Yusef Nurkic and Jokic. Like, you could just tell. And, and I said it, like, I was a huge Mudiay fan. Like, I really liked Mudiay coming out. And, like, with the size, the point guard size, like, he just had it all. But he just could never get the mental side of things and just get out of his own head, because he had all the tools to be a successful player in the NBA. But then you got a guy who's an absolute dog coming out of Kentucky from the Calipari system, and a Steph Curry light, if you will, who comes in and just plays really well and just automatically ships Mudiay off, and Jokic, who steps basically on the court once, and then it just changed the entire course of the history of the Denver Nuggets of where things were going, because at that point, Malone saw, this is the duo that I want to grow with, and more importantly, this is the duo that the Cronkies wanted to roll with, and so it's just like, it's just so sorry to kind of just go on and on, but it's just like,
no, I mean, that's what we're gonna do all night, Cam. We're gonna go over here. We're gonna come over here. We might come back this way a little bit. Ray, I agree. I definitely agree with that to an extent. I do believe he understands the work that needs to be done. I do believe he appreciates his time. I don't think that's the only reason, though, he wants to go home. I think he truly enjoys being away from the spotlight. This is not a guy who's going to end up living in America when he retires. This is a dude who will be in Serbia when he retires and will never be heard from again until the Nuggets send a team plane to get him for the 25th anniversary of the championship team or something weird like that. And then they'll fly him back and he'll come hang out for a weekend or something. Or this dude is completely content with that.
Or he has two homes. Like, he has two homes in Denver or in Colorado, and he has a home in Serbia. Like, because I could see him, I say this jokingly, he could be like Von Miller and have a chicken farm. Or in this case, like Miller and have like a horse farm, like truly like a farm for his horses in Colorado, and then the home and everything, that he's always had in Serbia. So I could definitely see.
I've thought about that, Cam, and I go back and forth on it. I don't know if he will, though. He loves his country. He loves his quietness in Sombor, out in the the prairies of Sombor, wherever he really lives. But remember 2 years ago, the team got on the team jet and flew to Serbia to bring him his MVP.
Right.
He didn't stick around. He didn't wait. That collective went and visited him.
Bro, I tell you what, I think all of us watched all the press conferences, all the videos. Like, his press conference, when he got so upset about, like, wait, I can't go home? Like, there's a parade? What the? Yeah. He was so angry. He was
that was not a Nikola Jokic joking moment. He was seriously like, oh, my God, I have to stay here 2 more days?
and I think the thing that's so awesome and funny about all of this is that I think that's also a side for Nikola Jokic that is hard for the national media to wrap themselves around, because all these superstars, and there are really good and humble superstars to a certain degree in the NBA. Like, as much as the Nuggets played really well against the Miami Heat, I actually really, really like Jimmy Butler. I like him as a player. I like him as a person. I like who he is as a superstar. But then you get some of the arrogant players, that are just all about, me or the spotlight.
Me.
And, and so like, that's just been this whole narrative that's being driven by, the way that we've seen the NBA nowadays. And it's been a little bit, and I will admittedly say it's been a little bit of a turnoff. And so call me a little bit of an old school guy, but it's just like when you finally have the opportunity to see something old or new, I should say, in the case of Nikola Jokic, it could turn people off, like in terms of the wrong way, in terms of like how you interpret something like that. Like, I don't want to go to a parade. I want to go home. So it's just like they could easily interpret that like he doesn't want to go to a parade. He wants to go home. Like, so yeah,
Twitter had was just like, is this guy like, this is the guy that's like the most unhappy about winning an NBA championship of all time. And there's just pictures of him, no smiling. Like he did the champagne instead of like actually like spraying the champagne. He did like, okay, I'm done.
He didn't even put his thumb over it. He just like held it, like shook the bottle, and then he went and stood in the corner for a little bit. I think people take his unwillingness to be in the spotlight as him not enjoying the moment.
Right.
I saw so many little things, especially the times with his daughter and his family, where I saw elation on his face. So this is not a guy who doesn't care. This is not a guy who wasn't ecstatic when he won. This is just a guy who didn't want to be in front of the cameras, didn't want to be in front of a mic, wanted to be behind closed doors with his teammates and celebrate.
You know who he is?
Victory Cigar, Clayton. It's Victory Cigar night, my guy.
He's Barry Sanders. Barry Sanders wanted no part of that spotlight. He didn't want to talk to anybody. Joker's probably a little bit better because he will talk and he'll joke a little bit and he's honest, but like his quotes last night had me rolling like that. When he talked about if nobody likes their job and if they do, they're lying. I was just like, oh damn. Like, come on, buddy.
It's also a nice parallel of a contrast between he and his brothers. Because
yes.
Because his brothers are literally the complete opposite of him. Like, they love the Nuggets. They love everything that they built. They are like the ultimate fan. They're hoisting freaking Michael Malone twice.
When they're throwing him?
Yeah, they did it twice. They're hoisting Michael Malone, and one of his brothers is like literally carrying Jokic like he's a kid again. Like,
dude, I want to party with those two.
And
the two older Jokic brothers, I want to hang out with those two for a night.
Bro, you can't drink that way, bro. They'll have you on the floor.
You'd be surprised. I got that Czech blood in me, kid. I'm good. I got that Eastern European blood in me.
All right, we need to cue up the scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark with, the scene between like Karen Allen and the
exactly.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised what that Czech blood can get done if it really wants to. Now, my problem would be that they're 3 times my size, so I would eventually have to bow myself out because when I'm smashed, they'd just be getting going. So, just body type would screw me in that situation. But, boy, it would be a lot of fun.
Clayton, are you asking in Game 5 or are you talking about the series? Like, what are we talking about there?
If it's about the series, or at least Game 5, I will tell you guys right now, obviously I'm not a box score watcher in my real life because I like to watch games, but I had to be a box score watcher because I was overseas. So I didn't get a chance to see Game 2, but I will say that was the most stressful game in terms of Game 5 that I think I had seen of the entire playoffs for the Nuggets, because that was at one point there was like from start to finish. And I said this in 5280, but it's like from the start of that game even to the end of that game. And I know they play better and more so in the fourth quarter than they did obviously in all the other quarters, but it's just like, from start to finish, that was the most stressful I had ever experienced it in the playoffs and everything that they had. And like, because it truly felt like Miami at one point, or in that Game 5, had all the momentum and all the control within that game. And it finally felt like Miami had broke through the mental fortitude of Denver within that game to get in their head. And then the Nuggets just started, picking it back up again, chipping away.
You want to know why I wasn't ever worried, Cam? and this is going to sound odd to some people, that I wasn't sweating it. I was just excited. And I was excited. And I don't know if you heard me say this during the Phoenix series, Cam, but Pinky, do you remember what I said about game 2 of the Phoenix series after that game was done?
You said you were, if I remember right, you were pretty damn confident that the Nuggets were doing things after that
I was. And the reason for that is because I said flat out that was game 2 against Phoenix in Denver when they had a brawl fight with that team to win that game, and they did not play great basketball. That was the best game that team had ever played together. Period, bar none. Best game of all their careers as a group, because they went and did something that they hadn't done before. They pulled out a game where they maybe shouldn't have won, but they broke through that mental barrier that they had of we think we should be here to we know we should be here. And they found a way to win ugly, as the sports term goes. And that game was a huge, huge building block for what they ended up going on to accomplish.
So, Clayton, we'll answer your question, but because of this, I got to bring up, last night I was at Good Company, which is a little dive bar near my house, and I was in all my emotions. I mean, we played so bad. I was in all my emotions. My buddy Greg, mainly a Kings fan, but he will rep the Nuggets when the Kings aren't in it. And he was like, bro, you guys you've turned the ball over 9 times.
Mm-hmm.
You've missed multiple free throws.
3-pointers.
And you're like literally
0 for 16 from 3 to start the game.
Mm-hmm.
1 for 15. 1
for 15. Sorry.
And you guys are only down 7. He's like, bro, no worries. You've got this. Like, they are going to come out in the third quarter like they always do, and they're going to take over. And so the whole second half, he was just sitting there going, what'd I tell you, Pinky? What'd I tell you? Like, because that's exactly what happened. We figured it out. We came to play. And again, much respect to Miami, but they had played a lot of basketball. They've played a lot of tough basketball, and they were tired. They were just drained.
Yeah, but I will say, though, for Miami's perspective, though, that was the best Miami game they played all that game 5. Like, because even if the Nuggets would go up a bit, they would claw their way back. But It wasn't, and it was never a game like they've recently had, which was, the Nuggets would go up like maybe to go off the Lakers series. The Nuggets go off the Nuggets go up 10 or 12 or 15, and then it gets brought back down to like 4 or something like that. That never happened, right? And so like in this particular game 5, the clincher, like they go up like 5, and then Miami would like chip away with another bucket and another bucket. And then in comes with, a joker, a floater, or, anything like that are just like where it was such a old school basketball game in the sense where every single point mattered.
I guarantee anybody who never saw a game in the 80s or 90s were literally like, what the hell are we watching? Like, those defensive brawls, close games, back and forth, low scoring. That 80s and 90s basketball, that was like the closest thing you could get to 80s and 90s basketball last night.
So, Clayton, to answer your question, I will say, honestly, it's 2-part for me. Overall, the bench, the role players, taking turns and stepping up in different games throughout the playoffs.
Absolutely.
Whether it was Christian Brown, Bruce Brown, KCP, Jeff Green had a couple big moments. There were many times when the role players were able to step up and contribute on a big level. That's all because of the 2 superstars that Denver has. Jokic and Murray do not care if they're the ones that are winning the game or if it's somebody else. Now, they're going to do what they need to do to keep the team where it needs to be, but they don't care if it's somebody else getting the spotlight. The second part of that, to get a little more specific, I will say it's MPJ. And the reason I'm going to say MPJ is because last night, I watched people bash him. They wanted him to stop shooting, pull him out, put Christian Brown in. Mike Malone was brilliant for what he did because I saw 2 things out of MPJ last night. I saw a guy who was putting in a tremendous amount of effort on the defensive end, which is not something he has been known for in the past. And it's part of the reason he didn't get a lot of playing time to start the season, and he had to earn those spots. His effort was huge on the boards specifically. The other thing I love seeing from him was he's a shooter, and shooters shoot. They don't know what cold means. They're going to continue to throw the ball up and hope it starts going in. That doesn't upset me when he's getting wide open looks and he was taking shots within rhythm. What I love, though, was about 3-4 minutes into the third quarter, he decided it's time for him to take the next step in his evolution of his game. My shot's not going down. What am I going to do? I'm going to be aggressive and take it to the rack. And that dude went strong to the hole on multiple occasions, putting the Heat in bad positions. And either he ended up scoring or there was an offensive rebound that was gathered and somebody else was able to get it and go back.
And that was
a huge step.
Totally out of character for him. So they weren't ready for that.
Well, not out of character. This is what I'm trying to explain right now. Not out of character. He just hadn't taken that next step yet. That growth hadn't happened yet. And we saw it happen before our very eyes in a closeout game in the NBA Finals in the second half. That's what was so huge to me.
I would actually go a step further. So I agree with you. To even answer Clayton's question, the role players, and even, I was a little bit surprised that you guys didn't mention this, and he only played for 2 minutes or 3 minutes.
I was going to get there.
But DeAndre Jordan, for the small little bit that he played, was actually meaningful. For the 2 minutes that he had a significant block in the presence that he had in that game. So the first time that he plays, he had some significant minutes. But as far as MPJ, I'd actually go a step further and say his actual growth as a player has actually been the entire course of the season.
I'll fully agree.
Not necessarily, the finals, because I feel like there were also some pieces in some games where you saw that extra effort, you saw that defensive intensity, you saw the if your shot was not going down, you saw okay, it's time to get dirty. And I think that's one of the reasons why people talk so much about the chemistry between Nikola and Jamal Murray, and it really didn't dawn on me until this. I think it's one of the reasons why Aaron Gordon and MPJ are so well in tuned, because if Aaron Gordon wants to play dirty and wants to pick up the trash, in terms of, to use a Mighty Ducks reference, D3, pick up the trash. But anyway, but basically, get every single rebound. I want to do the exact same thing. I want to get dirty. I want to, play scrappy. And that's not the type of game that MPJ is absolutely known for. He can shoot the lights out of the basketball. He is a 6'10" Steph Curry, Jamal Murray at 6'10". It's one of the reasons why people felt like he was a Kevin Durant type player, and so when you mix the type of different style of game that we have seen in this postseason, which is that defensive physicality and a physical rebounder, something we hadn't seen. He was a rebounder, but not a physical, rebounder for sure. Like he was.
His rebound in all playoffs was awesome.
Because there was
the reason I said the finals specifically. Yeah. I agree with you. The growth was all season, and watching him grow was incredible. Side note: part of the reason this team is able to get in the dogfights is because they did all those dogfights off the court. Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr., I don't think people understand the rehab that those two specifically had to go through over the last 2.5 years to even be able to be in this position. So what they put in off the court, they were finally able to show on the court. But the reason I felt that we saw not necessarily the growth per se, because like you said, it's happened all year, but what I saw is the next evolution of his game. I saw him all of a sudden lights go on and him say, I can do a little bit more here without shooting the ball from deep.
Or get creative. Yeah. I see what you mean. And get creative from not scoring, but don't get, to get creative, scoring in the mid-range game versus, on the perimeter. And I think that because if I don't know if anybody caught on this, but there was a reason why he started to kind of find some comfortability on his little side floater when he would get some of those, 2-point shots, like he felt comfortable on those like side floaters and why he would do that because if you're also a defender, that's a difficult shot to defend when the guy is 6'10" and he's moving the way and so like that's the kind of craftiness that if he's starting to implement that kinds of stuff in his game and it's in a very meaningful game clinching game 5 where they did win the NBA finals, that's the kind of confidence that is going to go with you into the next season. And especially knowing the fact that if this team showed the amount of patience that they did to Jamal Murray, what's to say that they can't do the exact same thing to me and become the player that I need to be, which is a more well-rounded player in every asset of that game. And the fact we started to see that now in a playoff run and a game-clinching game should give a lot of Nuggets fans
what we saw
a lot of
him
optimism.
During most of the season and in most of the playoff games, if he like shot the ball better in this, like I think we would have blown them out almost every game. He went so cold. I don't know if I've ever seen a guy just like, I know what I saw in the season and I know what I saw most of the playoffs. That guy can score 20 points a night, almost any night on regular. And then all of a sudden, like literally every shot he just took, like they were not falling. I have no way to explain like what happened.
But that's
now,
why
Cam, you mentioned something else. Sorry, real quick. You mentioned something else. And to tack on to Clayton's question, if I had to give an MVP award for the Nuggets as a team, the easy answer is Jokic. You could throw in Murray, only the 4th player in history to average 20 and 10 in an NBA Finals. However, my MVP for this team, for this playoff run, is Aaron Gordon. Because just like you said, he's willing to do the dirty. That man took on the responsibility of guarding the best team's player every single series. And you never saw 1 ounce of letdown from him in those matchups. And without Aaron Gordon being able to constantly force the action on the defensive end for the opposing team's star, the Nuggets don't get as many opportunities as they had on the offensive side to continue to push and pressure the other team. So the fact that Aaron Gordon is willing to accept his role and not just accept it, but want it and thrive in it, you cannot say how important that is enough.
Agree, and I think that when you look at what he is as a player and what he's really evolved into, because I mean everybody's going to gravitate, myself included, to those slam dunk competitions between Levine and Aaron Gordon, and just kind of thinking about Aaron Gordon as this this slam dunk champion. He's just a high flyer. He's like, he's just, the guy that's just going to attack the rim. But not to throw blame like the Sacramento Kings, if you will, of not giving patience to Michael Malone, you could say the exact same thing about the Orlando Magic not giving that type of patience to a guy like Aaron Gordon, given what we've seen now. Because, but I think that's also the beautiful thing about Nikola Jokic is he's made everyone around him better because of the fact that they know their role, they know their responsibility, and everything just starts and ends with him. And so that's why you start to see Aaron Gordon. And it's one of the reasons why I really feel like, everybody talks about, the Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic stuff, because of course they do. But it's one reason why I said the Aaron Gordon and MPJ comparison, because if there's one guy right now that MPJ should really lean off of in that dirty work, it's Aaron Gordon. And so Aaron Gordon becoming that kind of player where he is so much more of a complete player than he was in Orlando. I mean, he is the reason why they won one of the games against the Heat, was because of the fact he put 27. Because he's also capable of being that guy that can put 27 points up in a playoff game and be efficient and be that scrappy, dirty player, and basically be, I hate to say this because I love Kenyon Martin, but to be that type of player that Kenyon Martin needed to be on a regular basis to put up that kind of scoring on a regular basis, little bit of a different style player, a little bit, but it's just like, but the fact that you're able to see that kind of production on a regular basis from Aaron, and in that kind of style is just, you also see the side and growth of Aaron Gordon along with a lot of these other players.
I've already got my 50 jersey in my cart, man. I'm ready.
Not a boy.
That dude,
Not a boy. I think the other thing that cannot be stated enough, and I feel like has gotten little fanfare, little media attention, is the veteran presence of KCP, who won that championship in the bubble with the Lakers against this Nuggets team, and Jeff Green and DeAndre Jordan. Without those three and their calming factor that they are able to bring while at the same time lifting guys up in the moment is huge. And that's why I said this core, the way the team is built, to have a dynasty, you're going to have to move on from some of these guys eventually.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way dynasties work. Some of those pieces are going to have to be interchangeable with other pieces along the way. But to start off, your first one, maybe your first two, your first three, depending on how things can go and play out, they have everything you need already. They've got the old Grizzly veterans. They've got the superstars in the prime of their career, just starting the prime, really. And then you've got the young guys coming up that are going to learn, grow, and become possibly their own superstars. So it's just the chess pieces that were put together by Josh Kroenke, Tim Connelly, and now Calvin Booth are phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And then I'll say it again. For Kroenke to allow the organization to stay patient and build from within and let it play out is unheard of in today's day and age in sports.
So that brings up something I wanted to ask anyways, because on the 5280 podcast, they were kind of talking about things. They talked about Booth. They talked about Tim Connelly. Was it Tim Connelly with the Timberwolves, or was it the owners of the Timberwolves that said we need to go get Gobert and make like the worst trade in the NBA?
Absolutely ownership. Nobody will ever be able to convince me otherwise. That is the worst trade in the history of the NBA. Bar none, nothing even comes close. And I cannot imagine for the life of me that Tim Connelly would have given up all those pieces based on his time in Denver and what he was able to build to go get somebody who's an average player at best. I can't see Tim Connelly making that move.
By that same token, though, I will say, why did he go there in the first place? Like, I just...
You know why he went there. They gave him complete control of the organization and money.
Right.
I mean, he's doing a lot more with his own fingerprint on it than he was ever able to do in Denver.
Well, and so I think that's one of the reasons why I think there's at least some credence to the idea that Connelly at least had his hand, in that trade. Now, I will say, and you see it in football all the time, but it's like those are the kinds of trades that also get you fired. And so if it doesn't work out and they don't build around Anthony Edwards as they should, versus the Rudy Gobert's or anything like that, and he doesn't play up to where he needs to be, then Tim Connelly is going to be, a basketball operations person again. Like he's just going to not be that president of, operations or like the head guy anymore.
Who's the ownership now in Minnesota? Alex Rodriguez Group. Now, knowing that and knowing what we know about Alex Rodriguez and his career, do you think that was more of an ownership move or a Tim Connelly move?
It's just I get what you're saying, and it's probably more on the ownership side, but it's just there's at least percentage.
I will say, I agree. I will say though, I will put money that says Tim Connelly inquired about Gobert.
Mm-hmm.
I will say Tim Connelly had some conversations with Danny Ainge and then went, no, Danny, I'm not that dumb. And then ownership came in and said, go get him and we'll win now. And Connelly probably tried to talk him out of it. And they said, this is what we want. And so he went and made the deal, knowing full well it wasn't the right thing to do. That's my personal belief, and that's my personal feeling on the situation. It's no different than what just happened in Phoenix. New ownership came in. They wanted to make a splash move. They gutted the roster, they gutted their future for one player, thinking that was going to be the key piece, and shit hit the fan in a bad way. But there isn't one basketball mind in the NBA that turned around and said that's a good move for Minnesota. I didn't hear anyone in any form of chatter after that trade went down saying Minnesota just got what they needed to finally get over the hump. I never heard that.
Yeah, and I think that that's also the mark of also how good the Nuggets are constructually within their front office, because it is, to use this as an example, it's like going from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers or David Robinson to Tim Duncan. It's hard to have that kind of success within ownership to basically, or to front office, to basically go from a Tim Connolly to a guy basically stepping in his first year and then taking the team that, for all intents and purposes, was created by Connolly and Booth, and then making that into an NBA Finals champion. And so for as much as we definitely say, Booth is deserving of credit, we at least have to give that credit where credit is due, obviously, because you have to, with Tim Connolly for creating what was already there and what was already there in place, with these players. But then Booth, right? I mean, Booth, like taking those extra steps, and we said about the veteran presence, but taking those extra steps, bringing the veteran presence like a KCP, like a Bruce Brown, like a DeAndre Jordan, who we all hated the move. I was questioning the move. I'm sure a lot of people were questioning the move with DeAndre Jordan.
And really? You didn't like that move?
I was unsure about it. Like, I was just unsure at the time. But the fact is now he has a ring before CP3 and Blake Griffin. I mean, it's like thinking to yourself that JaVale McGee has a ring before Russell Westbrook. Like, those are the kinds of like people that like help separate you to win a championship. And it's like that goes back to, again, the veteran presence that Calvin Booth was able to create within this organization to help get that team over the hump and become that NBA Finals champion. So
absolutely. And I'll tell you why I like the DeAndre Jordan pickup real quick. They needed a big body to spell Jokic. Now, that's not exactly what DeAndre Jordan turned into. Obviously, we all know that. But they needed a big body to spell Jokic. They needed a defensive center presence, a rim protector, if you will, if it ever became needed. And that's a guy who has an insane amount of experience within the NBA. And he's never spoken out in any bad way on any team he's ever been on. He's just accepted his role, grinded, and put up numbers. So I was actually really excited about that move because I knew at best you're looking at him getting maybe 15 minutes a game because Jokic isn't going to be off the court that often. And if he is, and you don't need Jordan, you're playing some small ball. So to me, I liked the idea of DeAndre Jordan coming in.
And you also have Aaron Gordon, who clearly had proven that he can, be that backup center or that backup to Jokic in a pinch in a certain lineup. Like, so he's clearly proven to be that guy. So like, if given that opportunity for DeAndre in just a small amount of minutes, which by the way, that's also huge kudos to Michael Malone because, knowing the fact that given the 2 or 3 minutes that DeAndre Jordan played, the Miami Heat never did a hack of Jordan, that famous hack of Jordan, and putting DeAndre Jordan at the free throw line. So given the small minutes that Jordan was able to put it forth on the finals, like he was able to impact it and getting a block and impacting the defensive end.
All right. I got another one, guys. It's been all over Twitter. I'm really curious on your guys' answers to this. What is your rebuttal to the Nuggets won, but they had the easiest run in the playoffs ever?
Cam, I'll let you hit this first because I talked about this a little bit last week, and as Pinky said, our buddy Greg, good basketball mind, completely disagreed with what I had to say. And I'll double down on it tonight, but I'll let you go first.
Look, if it was easy, then the teams that should have been the finals should have been the finals. And bar none, the Denver Nuggets were the best team in the National Basketball Association this entire season. So they should have been the finals. they should have been in the finals. Now, Boston, Milwaukee, you can make a case there, but they didn't get the
Philly?
job done. They didn't get the job done. Simple as that. They didn't get the job done. And for anybody that is trying to clamor with this idea that it wasn't about and it also wasn't a dominant run for the Denver Nuggets or an all-time run for the Denver Nuggets because they dominated everybody. Thank you for sounding so dumb that you contradicted your entire statement by saying that that it's not a dominant run. Because by truly saying that, they dominated everybody and therefore it's not an all-time run, you've literally have just said it's an all-time playoff run and an all-time playoff championship run, which of course was led by a player who was in the number one category across all the stat books that is basically orchestrated by anything in the National Basketball Association, thus being Nikola Jokic. So miss me with all that BS in terms of like this whole idea that it's an easy run. If it was easy, then Milwaukee should have been in it. If it was easy, Boston should have been in it. And if it was easy, then they should have swept the Nuggets in 4. Didn't happen. They didn't get the job done. And what was easy was the Nuggets were the best team in the NBA and the number 1 seed all throughout, if you will. And they proved that by beating every single one of those teams rather handily from series to series and sea to shining sea.
Great point there, my man. What my point would be, especially in the Western Conference, well, if it was easy, would the Suns have been picked to win in 6 by most analysts as they were? And what'd we do? We won in 6. The Lakers were picked to win in 6. We swept them.
You could argue
right?
we even should have swept the Suns. The only reason why we lost 2 games was because Devin Booker decided to go 2K for 2 games, NBA 2K for 2 games, and literally shoot 80% from the field. That's the sole reason why they won 2 games.
I mentioned this too.
That,
I didn't like the scheme against the Suns the first 4 games of the series. I harped on this a lot with Pinky. The double teaming, the flashing of the double team, and the different looks of those double teams that were coming in, I believe was a huge mistake. They changed that game 5 and game 6. They didn't bring those double teams the same way. I said it from the start. You let Durant and Booker go off for 40 apiece every night. No problems. Let them have it. Because they're going to have to then find at least another 30 points every game from their bench and their role players. And the Suns players were never going to do that against the Nuggets. Never. So you let Devin Booker and you let Kevin Durant go off for 40 pieces a night. Fine. But that's only 80 points. And you're going to need, in an up and down game like that series was, you're going to need a minimum of 110 to win. And that was proven out. So once that scheme was changed and they started going more one-on-one, allowing them to have their points and shutting everybody else down, that series was locked and over. This is what I have to say about the run. And people have bashed me for this, and I don't care. I'll stand. Pinky, I'm all about an island by myself. I have no problems with that. But if you really want to break it down, you really want to look at it, every team Miami faced was flawed. Milwaukee was flawed because of their coaching. Plain and simple, and all respect to Budenholzer and what he was going through at the time. I cannot imagine having that type of loss in your family and then having to coach in those big moments. That's a huge mind F, to say the least. But plain and simple, game 5, where Miami won at the buzzer because Jimmy Butler was able to get an out-of-bounds alley-oop at the rim to win by 1, Giannis should have been guarding it. Like, plain and simple, there's zero reason why Giannis shouldn't have been on Jimmy Butler. You go put Brook Lopez on the inbounder. Giannis needs to be matched up one-on-one. The Bucks also had some holes throughout the season where they were never whole, and their continuity was not the same as it was 2 years ago when they were able to win.
Yeah.
When you look
blew them out by 30, I knew there was something going on.
Absolutely. When you look at the Knicks, anybody who thought the Knicks were legitimate title contenders or a real playoff team this year wasn't paying attention to what the Knicks were and who they had on their team. Miami was always a better team than the Knicks. Jalen Brunson's phenomenal. why am I drawing a blank on Julius Randle is a really good player. He's not a superstar. And he's got a selfish streak in him that's going to cause issues for the Knicks. Miami was always a better team than New York. And I've said time and time again throughout the season, and especially in the playoffs, that Boston is the most inconsistent team in the league, and Jason Tatum is the most inconsistent superstar in NBA history. And Greg pushed back on that with me last week, saying Jason Tatum's too young for you to say such a thing. James Harden is more inconsistent than him. I completely disagree. James Harden, you know exactly what you're going to get. Phenomenal regular season, and he's going to fall apart and not show up in the playoffs. That's not inconsistent. That is consistent. That's consistent at its ultimate form. You know exactly what you're going to get from James Harden. Jason Tatum can give you 51 in a closeout game, 7, and then 2 games later, he can give you 17 on like 8 of 30 shooting. And that is Jason Tatum. And that's been Jason Tatum for the last 3 years. You can say he's young, and that's fine. I'm not going to argue his youth. But his basketball maturity and his basketball experience is way beyond his years. Way beyond his years. Now to Miami, people are forgetting they were in the NBA Finals in the bubble. That wasn't a fluke. They were a 3-point shot off the front of the rim away last year from beating the Celtics in the Game 7 and going to the NBA Finals. People want to talk about how terrible they were this regular season, and that's why Miami wasn't a good team. But this is basically the same team that they had for the last 2 years. They just had a rough regular season. They had injuries. They had some internal strife, and that caused a bad regular season. But this Miami team isn't a fluke. This isn't a team that came out of nowhere and just had a magical run. Yes, it was a really good run. But this team, 2 out of the last 3 years was in the finals, and they were a front-of-the-rim 3-point shot away from being in the finals 3 years in a row. So for people to sit here and downgrade the Heat and say, well, it's a bunch of no-name undrafted players and this and that, like, you can talk about how they're undrafted all they want, but are they in the league now? Are they playing now? Are they starting now? Are they in the finals now? Then that undrafted stuff doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
What matters is the dudes can hoop and play, and they played well enough to get their team to where they were. So you want to go look at then what the Nuggets had to do. The Nuggets had to play the Timberwolves, which a lot of people think are on the verge of becoming a really good team with all their youth. Then they had to go play the Phoenix Suns. And just like Pinky said, people had the Suns picked, not the Nuggets in 6, because of Kevin Durant. Then you go play LeBron James and the Lakers, who beat these Nuggets 2 years ago in the bubble and caused some issues, 3 years, I guess, now, in the bubble, and caused some issues there. But if the Lakers had won, would anybody be talking about flaws in the Lakers? Would anybody be talking about LeBron James' injury? Would anybody be talking about Anthony Davis being street clothes and being inconsistent and not showing up in big moments? No.
Nope.
None of that would have been a conversation. It's only a conversation because a team that people didn't pick, a team that people didn't think would win, won. And so now people are scrambling to come up with these alternate narratives to back up their opinions and their thoughts and their feelings to try and justify why it didn't go the way they thought it would. So the similarities here between what the Nuggets and the Heat had to go through to get to the finals is a lot more similar than people want to give credit to.
Exactly.
And they're downgrading the team in the Heat for absolutely no reason, in my opinion. And so I'm tired of the narrative, Cam, just like you. I think it's a very weak argument with no real substance behind it. But a lot of people are trying to save face, and the only way they can do it is by downgrading one team to not uplift the Nuggets, but to just allow them to say that's why they're here.
And then to go a step further with it, like you go and you look at the Miami Heat, they also ran into basically a souped up version of themselves in the Denver Nuggets. A mentally tough, physical team, but they are just bigger than you and badder than you. And that's why I was a little bit hesitant and scared a little bit, because when you play as long as you did against the Miami Heat in 5 games, at some point, Miami had to at least have a game where they felt rather comfortable in a majority of the game. The question was, what was that resolve going to be like for the Nuggets? And we clearly saw that. And we clearly saw that in that Game 5 game, which, because for all intents and purposes in that Game 5, it was like a spitting image of Game 2. Like it was a rough game. And then you finally saw once again the Nuggets get over that hump and really show that they are the superior version of what the Heat were, for 2 of those 4 finals appearances. And so it's just like, it's tiring. And not to mention too, the Denver Nuggets play I find it contradictory too, because it's like, I also feel like maybe to them, the Nuggets maybe play a boring style of basketball. And a lot of people have said that, like, the Nuggets play a boring style of basketball. And it's like, okay, I'm trying to process on my mind. I'm like, okay, so when you guys were...
Got my blood boiling, Cam.
When you guys are clamoring, and I mean clamoring, in a national media. Now, the difference is Greg Popovich is well regarded as one of the greatest coaches of all time in any sport. Major League Baseball, NBA, whatever, any sport. He's like the Bill Belichick of basketball. But the thing is like the way the San Antonio Spurs were constructed, I use this comparison a little bit, was that they obviously did the pick and roll game with Duncan and Tony Parker, but they also played a team well-rounded game where it was nothing but find the open shooter and find the open passing lanes to where you were able to share the rock on a regular basis and create those lanes for shooters and role players who were understanding their roles. And so now you translate that to a beautiful brand of basketball that was and is the Denver Nuggets now. So why is that any less different than what we had seen with the San Antonio? It's not. Like it's nothing different in that sense. And so why would we be hating on the Denver Nuggets when it's in essence that same kind of basketball that we had seen for so many of those NBA championships with the Spurs?
The problem, well, most of the time the Spurs championships, defense, good overall team basketball. That's not what people like watching today. A real basketball fan will watch the Nuggets. They'll watch the Spurs from their dynasty.
The national media raved about the Spurs, like absolutely raved about it.
Here's the difference. and give me a second to breathe on this one, if you don't mind. First of all, Tim Duncan's the number 1 overall pick. That's going to give the Spurs more credence right there. Jokic, same dude, same talent level as Tim Duncan. Overall, not on the defensive end, but Jokic is more skilled on the offensive end. Maybe not by much, but he is. But Duncan's a superstar, number 1 overall pick. David Robinson was there already, number 1 overall pick. You look at that, and they already have a built-in fan base, if you will, nationally. The other thing about that is that the Spurs dynasty was just before this new era of 3-and-D, this new era of a little bit more fast-paced. So they missed the curve on that and allowed them some wiggle room. I cannot stand, and I consider myself a basketball guy, and I can chop it up with the best of them. You want to break down film? Let's break down film. You want to talk about individual players? Let's do it. I don't care. I will go toe-to-toe. I love this stuff. And if you don't enjoy a team that's playing team basketball, don't watch anymore. Literally, do not watch anymore, because that's the way the game is meant to be played. That's the way the game is supposed to be played. Right. And if you really want to dive down into it, the great teams of the late 70s and 80s and the Celtics and the Lakers and the late 80s and the Pistons and the Bulls, the Showtime Lakers, those teams all played team basketball. And it is no different than what the Nuggets did, but they had superstars that everybody wanted to put on top of a mountain and shine a spotlight on. The Nuggets superstar doesn't want the spotlight, doesn't want anything shining on him, doesn't want a mic in his face, and would rather walk away as soon as the game is over. And that hurts the overall narrative.
We're saying the same stuff, yeah.
To take it even a step further, everybody loves the Golden State Warriors, unless you're Boston or the Lakers. Okay? Everybody loves watching that team play. You know why that team won championships? Because Steph Curry is one of the most unselfish superstars in the history of the game, and because they played team basketball and defense when it mattered. No different than the Spurs, no different than what the Nuggets did. The only difference is they had arguably a top 10 all-time player in Steph Curry who completely changed the way the game's playing because of a certain skill level that he had. But Steph Curry is the reason they won with Kevin Durant. And I've said it before and I'll continue to say it. Steph Curry was the best player on that team even when Kevin Durant was on that team. And the reason I say that is because that man was willing to take a step back and play a role because he wanted to win. That didn't diminish his skill level. That didn't diminish his talent, his IQ, his willingness to win. It just said that we can dominate everything with this guy. I'm more than happy to take a step back. Jokic is the exact same way. He is a man who is changing the game as we speak in front of our eyes and is willing to let anybody and everybody have the spotlight, even if it's not him.
So,
these similarities, people need to start connecting the dots on, because true champions, the only championship team I can think of that didn't win that way, and they had some really solid bench contributions, but they did not win necessarily as a team ball, was the 2000 to 2002 Lakers when they three-peated. That was a Shaq and Kobe dominant team, period, bar none.
Yeah.
That's rare. That's rare. When you go back in the history of the NBA and you look at champions and you look at what it took for them to win, majority of those guys are going to win playing team ball.
Yeah, and I think that the other part of this that I think it's easy for guys and it's one of the reasons why watching stuff on NBA TV or anything like that is so much easier to watch and it's more breathtaking to watch, if you will, is because of the fact that you have old school players that are really understanding and respecting the fact of how the Nuggets are playing ball, because like what they had seen and grown up with some of those big men who were the focal point of the offense, you're seeing the exact same thing to a newer version with the Denver Nuggets. So, I mean, you're seeing the Steph Currys of the world, if you will, not to that extent, but you get what I'm saying with the Jamal Murray
Absolutely.
And stuff like this. So the pure scorers that Denver has, but you have it through the offense that's Nikola Jokic. So it's a different brand of basketball, but something that those old school lovers have loved, which is playing basketball through your center.
What did LeBron James say? And he made it a very, very specific point to mention after Game 4 losing in his press conference. What was the one thing that he made sure to talk about and say people didn't fully understand about Nikola Jokic?
Which he was asked point blank about it, by the way. And I'm not necessarily a big LeBron fan, but I also respect the fact that the reporter directly asked that question to get that out of LeBron, because LeBron had kind of held back a little bit about how he felt about Jokic publicly. And so, yeah, I'm with you to see that kind of answer and to see everything he felt about it. And then to see Kevin Durant do the exact same thing, to see Jimmy Butler do exactly the same thing, basically just saying, no, they were the better team. And people that need to understand how good Jokic is just need to watch the game more.
His IQ is off the charts. His basketball IQ is off the charts. There was a pass he made in Game 2. I believe it was Game 2. And it went almost non-existent in speaking terms from the national media. But he took a ball from the bottom block and spun and sent a cross-course pass to the opposite elbow three to, I believe it was Bruce Brown.
I thought that was Game 3.
Game 3, you're right. To Bruce Brown for a wide-open three. And And if you go back and watch that film, if you go back and watch that specific highlight, if you really pay attention to what's happening, Jokic was setting that play up before he even touched the ball because of the way he rotated and because of the way he moved down towards the low block on the opposite side and knew as soon as he caught that, they were going to bring two and he was going to have that guy open on the weak side. It was masterful. Masterful. And I played guard. I played point guard. That was where I thrived. A lot of it had to do with I was the tiniest dude on any team I ever played. But I enjoyed the insanely nice pass more than I enjoyed scoring. And when I see those things happen, it just makes me ecstatic to see somebody that can read the game that well and put his teammates in positions to succeed without them having to do anything to do it.
Insanely nice, efficient pass too. Like we should, yeah. Well, and I think that like, and so like this is the other part of it, and you know, Pinky listened to this on 5280, but it's just like we say this conversation a lot when you have the greatness discussion, and you know, every single player is great in their own right. And I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this, Caleb, because it's just like the way I explain it is to the extent of I'm not comparing him to Tom Brady, okay? But there was a thing about him with Tom Brady between Nikola Jokic that when Brady came into the league, the NFL Combine, right? The famous NFL Combine. Who is this Tom Brady guy? He looks weird. He looks funky. Who is this guy? And he played that unorthodox style at quarterback. What is he? What is he doing? Well, what does he end up going down and doing? He ends up winning championship after championship after championship and becoming maybe the greatest, quarterback of all time, right? So Nikola Jokic, he plays this unorthodox style, the style that you would truly see in a pickup basketball game, like a big fat guy that is just so successful. Every time you try and stop him, that like he chucks the three ball and it still goes in, even after you defend him really well, or he passes it behind the back or something, you know, and his athleticism or whatever you want to call it just surprises the crap out of you because of that behind the back pass. Like it's that kind of unorthodox style that I think has also turned people off. That it's just like it's such a different brand of basketball that it's like, you know, and so the way that it was described in a way is like not as comparisons, but it's like, how do you compare it except for grab, you know, 7 players that are a unique style, like the Nowitzkis and the Sombor Shuffle, or the, you know, or you know, the Magic Johnson being 6'9" and his ability to pass as a guard, maybe one of the greatest passers guards have ever seen, or even Bill Walton to a certain extent in terms of passing. So it's just like, you find this whole idea and this identity of like, who is this Nikola Jokic? Well, frankly, he may be 7 of those players, but this Nikola Jokic was, to be quite frank, built in a lab, because you can't beat anybody. You can't beat anybody like a Nikola Jokic on any given night, because he's 3 passes or 4 or 5 passes ahead of you every single night, like, or even every single possession.
I think it might have been JJ Redick. Somebody called him a unicorn, and I was like, yeah, that's the perfect way to describe it, because he's the only big man that can do everything that he does.
Here's the thing. And this is what blows my mind for the people that have played the game that should understand this and still downgrade what Jokic is able to do. Anybody that played the game growing up and ran to the gym, grabbed 5 dudes and started running against 5 other dudes, there was always that old man there who was just beating people down. And everybody goes, man, there's that old man game. He's not going to jump out of the gym. He's not going to run by you. But what he is going to do is he's going to be methodical. He's going to do things at his pace. And there is a fundamental skill level that everyone else is lacking. That's Jokic times 1,000. The skill level is beyond recognition. And people are finally starting to give him credit for that. You don't have to jump out of the gym to win.
No.
And one of the things I've said for a decade minimum now, is one of the things killing basketball is the AAU circuit. and this idea that if you can jump and you can run, you can play for me. No. If you're in the NBA, you should be able to dribble with your right and left hand. You should be able to lay up with your left and right hand. You should be able to baby hook with your left and right hand. You should be able to know your defensive assignments. You should be able to know where everybody else is on the court. You should be willing to make the extra pass. That's called good basketball. That's not something that should be abnormal in the game. That's something that's been lost since, I'll say it started around the late 90s, and it's progressed up until now. Now, the other thing I've also said is over the last 5 to 6 years, I believe the game has started to trend back to the fundamental skill level of basketball. And it's also starting to swing back to, and the new CBA will help this a lot, swing back to guys wanting to do it with the teams that they were drafted, playing with them for a whole career and seeing what they can accomplish, knowing if they can do it just once, that means a lot more than going and getting 3 or 4 hopping around all over the league. Giannis is doing it. Jokic is doing it. Steph already did it. Damian Lillard is doing it. And there's going to be more and more superstars that continue to take that path. We
may actually even say with Damian Lillard, like, because I kind of just threw unwillingly, like, here's a possibility they move on, but it's like he could still stay in Portland. So you're talking about hard work, though, and it made me think of that famous basketball quote, which was hard work beats talent when talent doesn't, work hard, right? Like,
absolutely.
That's exactly the quote that is truly like the Denver Nuggets to a absolute T. Like, truly, if you were to put in Ted Lasso fashion, not believe, but if you were to put in like Ted Lasso fashion, that quote, like in their locker room, that's basically the Denver Nuggets.
Here's the other thing, and this, I've caught heat for this ever since the first time I mentioned it many years ago, and I will continue to say it. Great offense will always beat great defense. Always. And the reason for that is because the offensive player in any sport always has the advantage because they know what they're going to do. The defense has to react. When you have to react to something, you're always a step behind. Now, if you want to say great defense will beat good offense, fine. I'm not going to argue that. I'm good with that. But great offense should always beat great defense. And one of the things I've always argued with for Nikola Jokic is, yes, his defense isn't all-time center great. It is above average, though, and people don't want to talk about that, but it is above average. It's not nearly as bad as people try to make it out to be.
I would say
his offense,
average, but yeah.
Yeah. His offense, though, is more than great. It's phenomenal. And he went and proved that in this playoff run. Nobody could stop him. He did whatever he wanted. And I don't want to hear this, well, he's not going up against another big man or great center. There's no great big men, blah, 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 blah. No. I don't want to hear any of that. What I want you to start recognizing is he is a phenomenal offensive talent. One of the best the game has ever seen. Top 10, in my opinion, that the game has ever seen on the offensive side. So when you say great offense, you want to find me great defense that's going to shut him down, I'm going to tell you it's not going to happen. Well, you might be able to slow him down for a little bit, but it's not going to stop him.
Well, and here's what's crazy when you think about this, because like if you think about it from the, how every single player on the, to kind of circle back a little bit, but like when we were talking about like some of the players and how they were growing this year, right? We were growing this year, like MPJ and Aaron Gordon, right? Like when we were talking about some of those players, there's actually, it sounds crazy because I agree with you. He's an all-time player, but we also saw in this particular playoffs, Jokic actually take that step from a above average defender to actually a almost elite defender, because every single player that he was actually going up against, which could have been an Anthony Davis, depending on the situation or anything like that, he was holding his own and playing really good defense. And frankly, you can make the argument it really wasn't until Bam Adebayo, who played the best out of anybody in that Miami Heat series, where you truly saw maybe it kind of come back down to earth a little bit for Jokic, but he would still try and work his tail off on that defensive end. And blocking shots. And then, so I really do think that, like, for Jokic, I think people may not have seen that, but it's just like you were starting to kind of see Jokic also turn that corner and be that steady defensive presence that people hadn't even seen.
Here's what I'll say about this. Two things. First off, Clayton. Great defense can win championships if it's playing against good offense. Or, and the reason Pinky says this is because Pinky is a football guy. And in football, effort is not enough to play defense. Effort alone does not do you good in football. In basketball, all defense is, and it blows my mind that people don't talk about this more. All defense is in basketball is willing to put in the effort of playing defense. Are you going to put in the effort to try and stay in front of your guy, to try and hound him, to try and stay connected to his hip? That's all defense is in basketball. Now, yes, there's some fundamentals. You got to shuffle your feet. You can't cross them over. You got to stay low. One hand up, one hand in the pocket. There are fundamentals that you should have still. But it's all about effort. Effort gets you a long ways. In football, scheme and coaching can screw you over faster than anything in the world. And if there's one thing I've always said about the NFL is they are in love with a square peg and a round hole. And Pinky always brings up the 2014 Super Bowl, Seattle and Denver being the elite offense, maybe the best in the history of the league, getting smoked by Seattle's defense. Well, I would argue that they went in there with a terrible game plan, an atrocious game plan from a very conservative coach in John Fox. So when you see great offense and great defense in football, there are so many more moving parts, and coaching has such a big effect on a football team. Whereas in basketball, yes, there are schematics. Yes, there are things coaches want you to do. But if you just put in the effort, you can cover up a lot of blemishes in basketball. So when I'm talking great offense versus great defense, I'm speaking purely just the talent level. Just player to player, great offense should always win. Always.
Do you want to
But in football, you start doing chess pieces and moving them around, things can look ugly real fast.
Do you want to rebut that, Pinky?
Nah, man, we've been doing this for 3 years, bro. I'm going to let him die on that hill. It's cool, man.
Well, so the thing is, I was going to say, I think that you do see more of the fact that offense wins championships more in the NBA than in the NFL, because defense, I think, does win more championships, say, in the NFL. But offense, I think, has a lot more credence in the NBA because of we saw it in Game 5. Like, that's prime example. Like, the Heat were in control for that almost that entire game, but like it was such a low-scoring game where it was truly the case where every single point mattered. Like truly, like every single point mattered, every single possession, offensive possession mattered. And so I think that when you can get to that point from the basketball perspective, truly offense has to carry it. And it's probably one of the reasons why you have seen the uptick in the 3-point offenses and stuff like that in this era of basketball, and stuff like the Golden State Warriors, if you will, really kind of changed the way that teams have viewed their offense in terms of just shooting the lights out of the ball from the 3-point side of things and creating your own shot, and doing all sorts of stuff from the 3-point line to basically create all your offense on the outside and then, work your way on the inside, basically. Like
here's the other thing about basketball that's so beautiful. Unlike football, you play both ends of the court. You have to play offense and defense. You don't go sit and watch somebody else do the job for you. And with that being said, you always hear great defense creates good offense. I have always been under the impression that great offense creates good defense. Because if you put the other team in a position where they're scrambling because of what you're doing to them on the offensive end, they're going to start making mistakes because they're going to be pushing and forcing issues that they otherwise would not have done because you're sitting there going down scoring every possession and they're doing everything they can to keep up.
That's why hockey and soccer are in those same veins, because
Absolutely.
they're not sitting, because hockey, especially because they're moving at such a NASCAR pace. One, I would hate to be a play-by-play guy to actually call that. Because I would literally have to be on Adderall for me to actually like keep up with everything in terms of the pace of play. But like, just everything happens so fast that you have to basically play offense and defense because of to use a basketball term, the fast break points or the shorthanded goals. Like you have to be able to, play at such a rampant pace, and always, every single sport certainly has their own mental fortitude or your mental toughness, or I call the 6 inches, right? But it's just like every single sport has that. It's just dependent upon how you're wired, and in each individual sport, they're just wired differently, and that's why whenever you play soccer, you play hockey, or you play basketball, you have to be wired almost exactly the same on the offensive side of the ball as you are on the defensive side of the ball, because there are no there are what was the line from this Denver Nuggets year? There are no missteps. Truly, there's no missteps in every single possession when you are playing on defense or offense. There is no missed steps.
That's a good one.
Love it. I love it. Pinky, what are you going to take away from this season with the Denver Nuggets?
I think, and this was a lot of what, was talked about of the Heat the whole time, is they like it the hard way, and they have a culture, and they fight. And I saw that in the Nuggets like all the time. They were always fighting for each other. They care for each other. They care for their coach. This was a team. You can say, I mean, I think we all agree, like they have the best player in the universe right now on their team.
Nope, he's above average. He's okay.
I mean, we know the truth. So I think that goes a long way when you have that best player in the universe. But when that best player makes everybody around him better, you're a team. You are a true team. And I think even if you're not a Nuggets fan, I feel like I would hope that you would watch that throughout this entire season and see that this is a team and they play together. Because I think that's the best
in the last 5 years. Highest rated playoffs in the last 5 years, and people said it wasn't going to be watched with the Nuggets winning.
Yeah, right.
Cam, what would you take away from this season with the Nugs?
To circle back on the conversation, they do have to bring Bruce Brown back. I think they need to try everything they can to bring Bruce Brown back. But I will say, one of the biggest things that I really do take away from this year, and even maybe from years prior, is just this idea that they won different games all year long. They've won different games all year long, and that is the mark of a superior championship team, is when you can win every single game, if you will, against the Miami Heat, and it's under 100 points, or you can beat the Phoenix Suns and you don't score 100 points, and you beat the Miami Heat in a game 5 and they don't score 100 and you don't score 100. Those are different types of games. Or if it's a high-scoring game, you can win. You've clearly shown that you can put up the necessary points and win a 135 to a 125 game. So, I mean, the fact that this team has gone through so much this year, it has mentally prepared them for that next season. And that's why I was so impressed with that second half of the Denver Nuggets, because they played their worst first half of the entire playoffs against the Heat in Game 5. And the fact that they turned it around piece by piece, possession by possession, a block shot by Aaron Gordon, a key defensive stop by KCP, a drive to the basket, a key drive to the basket by Bruce Brown, when it looked like the Miami Heat were going to rebound that basketball, and Brown just comes flying in and grabs the basketball and drops it in.
Christian Brown catching the layup and putting it right back up.
Or no, just to that extent, though, in Game 3, Christian Brown going up and literally bodying up Jimmy Butler for a layup and going for 17. And if that's the kind of Christian Brown that we get in the future, if that's a sign of things to come, then maybe you do move on from Bruce Brown. But can we bank on that? I don't know. But so the fact that they were able to win in so many different fashions, and it all was led by your dynamic duo, and a duo that was built and not bought, is just something that is you can never take away from this team. And so the fact that you have a Jamal, and maybe that's the other part of this too, is like, to circle back to, we talked about the growth of Nikola Jokic. I'm rambling on and on and on. But I think one of the things that I also learned about this is that Jamal Murray has now taken a larger step in his playing career. He's now no longer a scorer, ladies and gentlemen. He is now an assist playmaker. He has now become the true point guard playmaker that he needed to be for this team to truly be a superhuman squad that no team will ever beat. And if you want to be a dynasty, that's the kind of playmaking duo that you need to have. Because if Jokic doesn't have that kind of night, okay, Murray, it's time for you to go off and have that kind of night, because Jokic isn't having it. Or if the others aren't going to have it, all right, Jokic, Murray, let's go feed one another, feed some of the others who do have that hot hand, because we can contribute in other ways that others clearly can't. So Murray has clearly evolved his game into a much more all-rounded point guard game, to now he has entered himself in the conversation as far as the elite point guards in the NBA after these NBA finals. Mic drop.
Well said. Well said. I've got 1,000 other things I could talk about. I could chop this up for another couple hours, but I will end it with this. You always hear people talking about players in their prime. This Nuggets team, as a team, has just entered their prime. And after watching what they did throughout the season, listening to what Cam just said and talking about them being able to win in different ways, listening to what Pinky just talked about and the ability to win as a team, the idea that they were able to grow, mature, and come together as a whole. Like I said, to have a dynasty, parts are going to move, whether fans like it or not. It's inevitable and it has to happen. But this team has now just entered their prime. And there's going to be a lot of fun moments still to come for this Denver Nuggets team and this organization and this city and these fans. So buckle up. It's not always going to be pretty. It's not going to always be this fun. But we're going to have a lot of exciting moments still to come, ladies and gentlemen. And I am here for it 100%. Cam, always a pleasure. Glad you could join us tonight. Pinky, you're my dude. Everybody out there, as always, we appreciate the support. We love the support more than you will ever know. Like, follow, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. It means the world to us. Do not take those moments with those people you consider to be in your inner circle for granted. Love them, cherish them, hold on to them as tight as possible, and always take advantage of them when they're presented. We're out. It's been fun, fellas.
Yeah, thanks again.
Cam, appreciate you, buddy.
Yeah, it was always a blast. So thanks again. Go Nuggets. I will try my hardest to make the parade on Thursday. But yeah, so thanks again, boys. Go Nuggets.